50,000 years ago, someone stuck stone to wood with a black tar-like lump. Long before glue ever came in a bottle, people were already making their own. Instead, our ancestors made sticky substances of their own. Archaeologists pulled a stone tool from under the Dutch North Sea. That tool had a dark sticky patch on it called birch tar. People in labs have shown how to make birch tar by heating bark with very little air. That process cooks bark in a low-oxygen fire and makes a black glue. They also dug up a narrow bone with 168 small notches on it. That bone is often called the Ishango bone. It was found in 1960 in the Semliki Valley of the Congo. Many researchers think those notches were a way to count things, but other researchers disagree, so the meaning is still argued. At a place called Göbekli Tepe, people set up tall T-shaped stones. Quick thing before we go on. If you're enjoying this, like and subscribe to help us grow. Okay, back to it. Some of those stones weighed between 7 and 50 tons. This was long before farming or pottery existed. So the story that ancient people were primitive is wrong. These are 7 Stone Age feats that still puzzle scientists. The simple surprise is this: the people who did them were our ancestors. They did not come from aliens or magic. A real Neanderthal tool from the North Sea had birch tar stuck to it. The tar on that tool dates to about 50,000 years ago. Making tar needs steady heat and very little air. So researchers have tried to copy the method in experiments. Those experiments show you can make tar by heating bark in low-oxygen pits. The process works at a few hundred degrees Celsius, but the experiments only show one way to do it, not the exact way people did it then. They also found the Ishango bone, with 168 notches, back in 1960. It came from the Semliki Valley and is about 20,000 years old. Many experts read the marks as simple tallies or counts. Others think the marks track moon cycles or something else. So, the counting idea is debated. Skilled people chipped volcanic glass into very thin blades called obsidian blades. Under a microscope, the edges look even sharper than surgical steel. Those blades came from only a few volcanic spots and then moved far away. At Mezhyrich in Ukraine, families built houses from mammoth bones. Those structures date to about 15,000 to 18,000 years ago. Some huts used about 149 bones and had floors around 12 to 24 square meters. This channel drops you inside ancient humans' lives to see what survival took. They made a strong glue. A tool pulled from the North Sea had birch tar on it. Scientists think it dates to about 50,000 years ago. Lab teams have copied the tar by heating bark in low-oxygen pits. At Ishango, they found that notched bone in 1960. The bone has 168 notches carved along it. Some people read those marks as tallies, but others do not. They set up carved T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe about 11,600 years ago. Those people were still hunting and moving around. Farming had not started there yet. The steady surprise is this: our ancestors planned, froze, and kept getting smarter. That steady surprise is the payoff for watching. If you like this kind of clear, raw history, subscribe to Primal U. What follows is not a long list of fancy Stone Age gadgets. Each item is a real find with a real date. Each item also comes with a plain human idea for how they might have made it. For example, birch tar glue on a tool from the Dutch North Sea dates to about 50,000 years ago. People in labs have copied that glue by heating bark in low-oxygen pits. Those lab tests show the chemistry is possible with simple hearth control. The Ishango bone was dug up in 1960 in the Semliki Valley of the Congo. Modern dating puts it at about 20,000 years old. It carries 168 small notches in groups along its length. Many researchers think those notches are a way to count. But the idea is still debated among experts. Those obsidian blades were flaked to edges finer than modern surgical steel. People struck flakes from volcanic glass until the edge became very thin. Pieces of that glass show up far from the few places it came from. That means people carried the raw material long distances. Experts still argue how people learned and spread such fine skills. They struck flakes and pushed thin slices into knives. Lab tests show obsidian can cut cleaner than surgical steel. They did not smash the stone. They pressed with a bone or wood tool to peel hair-thin flakes. They hauled glassy nodules a long way and treated them as rare raw material. Researchers still ask how small bands taught this craft before metal and workshops existed. That fine edge takes steady hands and long practice. It was not luck. Modern makers can copy those razor edges, but only after many years of practice. Lab measures find obsidian edges can be sharper than surgical steel. Archaeologists find finished blades hundreds of kilometers from the volcanic sources. That pattern implies specialists, trade, and skill passed down over generations. The human answer is simple. A few people learned rare skills, and others traded for their work. Skill got concentrated in a few hands. They produced fine obsidian blades and moved the raw stone far from its source. Skilled hands made that glue. A birch tar trace on a Dutch North Sea tool dates to about 50,000 years ago. Lab teams have copied that tar using low oxygen heating at a few hundred degrees. The next Stone Age puzzle is far heavier. Göbekli Tepe's T-pillars weigh between 7 and 50 tons. Those stones were put in place by people before farming began. That level of organized work suggests systems of specialists and reward. Trade tied those pieces together. Some people learned to make very fine tools. Others may have traded food, hides, or shelter for those skills. Mezhyrich's houses, made from about 149 mammoth bones, match this pattern. At Mezhyrich, they built whole houses from mammoth bones. Excavations date those structures to roughly 15,000 to 18,000 years ago. The known houses include about 149 bones and floors around 12-24 square meters. They set ribs and tusks upright to make arches and posts. Those bones formed real rooms, not crude piles. How they lifted and joined such heavy pieces is still debated. Some experimental teams say ropes, levers, and a few dozen helpers could do it. The result was practical houses big enough to sleep, cook, and shelter a small group from wind and cold. Those circles of bone were not art projects. At Mezhyrich, they set bones into rings around living spaces. Each ring had a small floor of about 12 to 24 square meters. Across the huts, researchers counted about 149 bones forming wall rings. They roofed and packed the walls for warmth and kept fires inside. They returned to the same houses winter after winter. They dragged T-pillars weighing 7 to 50 tons into place. Many researchers still debate how they lifted them. Some suggest ramps, sleds, levers, or long human chains. Quarry scars and unfinished pillars show the work came in clear stages. They picked high ridges and dry knolls so seasonal floods would not wash the place away. They timed heavy hauling by the weather. They moved big loads when rivers were low or when the ground froze, so sleds rolled better. At Mezhyrich, builders used about 149 mammoth bones across the houses. That count suggests coordinated, pooled labor by a sizable group. When winter closed in, they pooled labor and time to build. Archaeologists at Mezhyrich found houses made from about 149 mammoth bones. Those structures covered 12 to 24 square meters, space for a family. To drag and raise heavy bone and stone, they could call on the whole band. That cooperation was their technology. It was practiced, enforced, and handed down. Now, the Shigir idol. This carved wooden statue dates to about 12,500 years ago. It survived because peat soaked and sealed the wood. When archaeologists pulled it out, they found at least 7 carved faces along its length. Many researchers call it the world's oldest wooden sculpture. That still surprises specialists. Researchers still debate how and why people carved it. Many suggest patient handwork with sharp stone tools, but the true purpose remains unknown. So the Shigir idol is a tall carved plank with 7 faces dated to about 12,500 years ago. It lived in a bog and then sank into peat. Peat is soggy mud with very little air, and it acts like a natural fridge. Because of that, the wood stayed whole instead of rotting. The carving is detailed, with repeating faces and bands of patterns. Those repeated cuts look like shared symbolic work, not casual scratches. The exact meaning of the faces is still argued by experts. They pulled a carved pole out of a peat bog in the Ural Hills. Radiocarbon tests date the wood to about 12,500 years ago. 7 carved faces run down its length, each made with steady repeating cuts. Scholars still debate its purpose, ancestor statue, myth map, or object of memory. But it is an unmistakable sign of careful symbolic thought. Wet peat preserved that pole so 12,000 years later, we still read a carved story. The Shigir idol is about 12,500 years old and bears 7 carved faces. Scientists still argue what those faces meant. So, they carved stories into wood the way later people put words on paper. A single carved column could lock a rule into public life, so everyone learned the same thing. The human answer is simple. They carved memories into wood, so groups shared the same story. After smaller tools came something massive. Göbekli Tepe, 11,600 years ago. They stood tall T-shaped stones carved with animals and strange marks. Some pillars weighed roughly 7 to 50 tons. This was before farming or pottery. People were still mobile hunter-gatherers. Scientists still debate how they raised the stones. Some archaeologists have built replicas with ropes, levers, and ramps to show it was possible. At Göbekli Tepe, they cut massive T-shaped pillars from local limestone. Those pillars date to about 11,600 years ago and weigh from 7 to 50 tons. They carved human faces and animals into the stones. They quarried, moved, joined, and lifted those pillars with ropes and timber. They did this without signs of large-scale farming at the site. The site rewrote assumptions that farming must come before big building projects. Excavators uncovered camps thick with animal bones and hearths. Those deposits point to seasonal visitors arriving in bursts, not year-round residents. Where the quarried stones came from is still debated among researchers. The T-pillars weigh 7 to 50 tons each, so moving them needed careful choreography. Experiments show ropes, ramps, and rollers could shift big stone. But who organized that work is still the puzzle. At Göbekli Tepe, hunter-gatherers raised T-pillars and experts still debate how they did it. Archaeologists found large piles of animal bones and clustered hearths, the kind of mess a big seasonal feast leaves. And if this pulled you into the ancient world, do one quick thing. Like and subscribe to help us grow. The pillars were carved with animals and rebuilt again and again.